Now the question is, are people in the rural areas have that buying power, which companies are looking for? That's why you see most of the companies moving to the city areas as opposed to the rural areas. I just want us to take that into cognizance while we are still pushing our recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And the good professor said, are we not in Africa? Will we not then create ventures that will address the social needs? I'm just trying to make you think further. The ball is in your court. However, we need to agree at this particular point on our recommendations. And time is not on our side. What recommendations are?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at what has happened in Japan, when they discovered they are doing very well, they found out their neighbors are not doing very well. So they started outsourcing. They told them, make this component, the other component, and something else. We can also talk to the government to see how they can, the private sector can also cultivate, a culture of outsourcing some of the items so that the youth can also participate in the production of some of the components. They do it in the motor industry, they do it in other sectors. It's possible. You can outsource some services, yes, and that's a very good way of ensuring that people, wherever they are, whether they're in the rural area, they are also involved in that particular given activity.
Okay. Right. Our time is up, and we need to go to plenary in the next 10 minutes. It's 16:20, so we need to go to plenary at 16:30, and we need recommendations. So finally, what we have been able to discuss at this time, we can add them later, but I will need another set of people to tailor this into a very nice way that sounds like a recommendation. Are we okay? The first one is on relaxation of labor laws. The second one is on expanding to rural areas, urging private sector to expand to rural areas. And the third one is on the inclusion of involvement of private sector in curriculum development. That is what you have been able to come up with as at now. Do we have additions? Do we agree so that this can be then prepared in a very nice way into a recommendation?
Yes. Okay, can I say something?
We will not finish.
We won't, but the one on the service in rural areas, is counterintuitive to what's going on in the private sector. In fact, quite frankly, we want people in the cities because you're able to provide more services and goods, and they tend to be wealthier and access to whatever in a very small place. The reality is that there's just no infrastructure available in the rural areas for as an incentive for anyone to go out there, unless it's providing a service through mobile phones, grocery technologies, and that sort. So it's kind of counterintuitive. So I don't know what, yes, we can include it, but there's some gaping holes that are in it. That's all.
All right.
I think
the microphone, please.
I think we could quickly solve this rural area thing, which is very, very valid. We can make it that the private sector should have a policy of 20-30% local content. That would, in terms of their input.
Absolutely.
Say that again, sorry.
The private sector could have 20-30% inputs in local content.
Yeah, that's measurable and that would work.
Okay, so could we have like 3 people formulate this? Okay, we need the writers again. Do we take the same guys?
No?
No. All right, can we quickly then, quickly volunteer? Just 3 guys.
Let's present our 3.
Yes, please, because we don't have time and we need to present this in plenary. Volunteers, I think, as I did last time.
I'll write that one on later.
All right, thank you. We have one.
I have one for you here.
Thank you very much. We have one more lady, the lady from Tunisia. Thank you. Tunisia was the easiest country to say. So the 3 of you, please, could you help us with that? And yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you. And the lady from Tunisia, thank you. And the gentleman here, thank you. All right. For the team that had gone to formulate the first recommendations that were in regards to entrepreneurship, and if you could have one meeting, please. I am still in power. And power is sweet. So please, if you want to buy for this chair, you can try next election. The first one, The first recommendation is governments should develop clear incubation policies with specific guidelines for youth empowerment with timelines for implementation. Number 2, governments should have clear social inclusion policies for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to access finance and government patronage and procurement.
In procurement.
I said and.
Government patronage and procurement, yes.
I'm reading. And. The third one is governments in partnership with private sector and training institutions to ensure the introduction of practical entrepreneurship curriculum from secondary to tertiary levels. Full stop. Are we in consensus? Are they sounding like the things we send them to do? Yes or no? Yes.
Yeah, I have a small question. What would be the role of youth in all this? Mainly the incubation bodies, because that's where youth can actively do something. And
let her finish.
Yeah. So it sounds that we always always telling people what to do for them, and I'm sounding this again in all 6 recommendations. So can we turn one of these to engage youth in that?
Okay. So what you're saying is that as much as you're talking about government and working in partnership with the, let's say, private sector, also with youth to realize all this we're saying.
And also for AU to appoint a youth organization in each country to follow up and monitor what is going on between AU and the government, because sometimes I have difficulty to make a difference between AU and our local governments.
Now that is another recommendation, which is very tough. Okay. Are you responding? Okay.
According to the president, if he says we should not bother to post this thing that was signed by them, how are we so sure they will follow or impact on these 3 recommendations we are giving us? That they won't divert what they would listen to us. Because if they could not follow what they actually sent, are they going to impact this? Because it's just like a waste of time. So it needs to be measurable and monitoring.
You are very interesting and dynamic set of young people who have right now spent 2 hours agreeing and finally disagreeing. Like now this, Caroline, you should put it aside and let's not. What are we saying? What are we saying? We are saying that what this group has done is good, right? Yes. But there's a gap in the role of young people, if I heard you correctly.
Exactly.
Baka. Oh, now I'm speaking Amharic. Sorry. So can we then just formulate with your consensus just one thing that the young people
I think we shouldn't lose sight of one thing. That you cannot have the incubation without the youth having their ideas.
Yes.
And if you don't have the ideas, the incubators will not work.
Okay.
So the commitment of the youth is in them engaging themselves to develop ideas that are game changers for society.
Excuse me. I totally, I'm sorry. Can I? I totally agree with what he's saying. But what I also noticed in policies and elaborating engaged commitment, when it's not specifically said, the role of youth, they'll put whoever they want to do those things in the name of youth, but not with youth.
Thank you very much. So allow me as chair, in the powers vested upon me, to Madam, can you write for me one paragraph of what you're saying, the role of young people, what we have said?
One sentence.
Baka. One sentence, just that. He said it's in the air.
Not in the air.
We need it written down.
No, not in the air. He said it in the beginning. When a youth come together as 20 cluster, 20, whatever it is.
I agree.
Please put that one.
So
they know they cannot refuse an incubation body.
We need that one down. Are you understanding me, please?
Yeah, I think we need that one down, written down. But I think what she's saying is that where we have written there for the youth, we change it to it with the youth.
With the youth, not
yes,
for the youth.
not for the youth,
Okay.
with the youth, right?
Okay.
Not for the youth, with the youth.
Okay.
They do whatever we have stipulated there with the youth, so that they engage the youth either at the AU level or at the government, national government levels.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I want to thank all of you for really trying to contribute, agree and disagree. I hope this has been productive. Thank you very much for your contribution and see you later.
Private sectors regarding internship, approaching academic institutions for internship compulsory. If it is compulsory, private sectors will be forced to partner with academic institutions and seek for young interns into their organizations. And this will be easy for them rather than posting a job vacancy announcement and seeking for a job. So.
Thank you very much for your contribution. There was a hand somewhere.
You can't do that. You can't mandate it. The cost of employing in Africa are already higher than anywhere else in the world. Once you mandate it, guess what? All the businesses and private that you talk about, you become uncompetitive and everything goes to China. Simple and straightforward. You've got to incentivize the private sector to do it. It's a very difference between mandating and incentivizing.
Wow, now that is from the horse's mouth. He didn't even look at the chair. And thank you very much for and that is why we are here, you know, it is a debate. Thank you, sir, for your contribution again. And thank you for having you here. As much as we are contributing, I mean, there are things that, again, they are not making sense in the ideal space that we are in. So let us contribute, but also let us respond and react so that we are able at the end of the day to give recommendations that are relevant and that can work and that can make Africa be the place to be, right? For entrepreneurs. Yes. You have to use the mic because we need to hear you.
Okay, my name is Patience Kente. I'm from the African Union. I wanted to still, I want to be on the same side with my brother here. I think our governments need to actually have to set up national internship programs because every student, before they actually recruit you anywhere, they want 5 years experience, 6 years, 10 years experience. Where are you supposed to get this experience if you've not gotten a chance for an internship, if you've not gotten a chance to work with some organization? For example, I think in my first year, it was compulsory to have an internship, but we used to linger the streets from office to office just to get an internship. It doesn't matter whether you have the qualifications they're looking for. Just for an internship, you're doing the work for free and everything for free. But it would take you over 5 months to find an internship. If we are to be employable, like they say, and accumulate the experience, they're saying there should be a certain structure, a national internship program. For example, where universities actually attach you according to your specific, to what you've learned, attach you to a certain institution. And what do you mean by incentives? I mean, isn't it incentive enough that I don't know how I can explain it, but I think there shouldn't be.
It has to be done.
It has to be done.
Thank you very much, Patience. What do the rest of us think? We need to contribute, then we need to get to our recommendations, right? And we have 50 minutes. I think so. Yes, Musu.
Ok, moi je reviens toujours parce que je suis passionné d'entrepreneuriat. C'est un domaine sur lequel je travaille depuis 5 ans en Afrique de l'Ouest, en particulier avec le secteur privé. Il faut bien dire ce qui intéresse le secteur privé, c'est une main-d'œuvre bien formée. Maintenant, ce qu'il faudrait développer ce qu'on a commencé à développer dans nos pays, surtout dans la zone où je maîtrise en Afrique de l'Ouest, c'est ce qu'on appelle chaque année chez nous au Sénégal le marathon de l'emploi. On demande aux diplômés d'école de commerce, on contacte l'ensemble du patronat du CNP au Sénégal, on leur dit recevez les diplômés de commerce et donnez-leur les informations sur les postes vacants ou sur les stages, sur les besoins sur toute une année. Une fois cela fait, on le collecte sur une base de données. On partage avec les écoles de commerce. Pour ceux qui sont en 4e, 5e année, en fin d'année, on partage ces informations avec eux pour leur dire voici les profils qu'ont besoin les entreprises. Plus précisément, ça c'est un premier niveau. Le deuxième niveau qu'on a développé aussi pour intéresser le secteur privé à envahir l'emploi des jeunes, c'est le job shadowing. Ceux qui sont aux États-Unis connaissent le job shadowing. C'est de prendre, on demande au CNP, au patronat, on fait ce qu'on appelle les petits déjeuners d'affaires avec les chefs d'entreprise. On leur demande, c'est un étudiant de première, deuxième année, peut-être qu'il n'a pas cette expérience, qu'il ne peut pas faire, même s'il peut faire grand chose, il n'a pas encore tout le background nécessaire, mais recevez-le au moins pendant 15 jours en stage d'observation. L'étudiant va voir. Dans sa spécialité, s'il fait marketing, s'il fait finance, s'il fait com, il va voir comment un financier travaille, comment le département marketing travaille, comment faire des plans. Ça, c'est un troisième niveau. Et enfin, on invite à chaque fois qu'il y ait des concours, le secteur privé, tel que les grandes entreprises comme Orange au Sénégal, plus précisément, puisque moi je travaille au Sénégal, l'agence de développement de l'informatique, ainsi que d'autres grandes entreprises, à faire à lancer des concours en entrepreneuriat, ce qu'on appelle chez nous les Youth Ventures. Ça, je pense que c'est de bonnes pratiques qu'il faudrait aussi développer dans certains pays. L'autre chose, c'est on fait de telle sorte que l'État, les employeurs, le secteur privé, ainsi que les écoles de commerce se rencontrent. Parce qu'au Sénégal, moi, quand je suis arrivé, j'avais fait une observation. Chacun travaillait à part. L'État faisait ses réunions à part, le CNP faisait ses réunions à part, les écoles de commerce faisaient le curriculum à part. Depuis 2 ans, on a une coordination générale de l'ensemble des acteurs et ça nous permet aujourd'hui de cerner les besoins et d'inviter le secteur privé à aider les jeunes à avoir un emploi. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Any other contribution? Yes, the lady at the back. Come to where the mic is.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Cécilia Mangamba, je suis de la RD Congo. Les interventions, j'ai bien suivi avec attention les interventions des amis. Mais en fait, mon cher ami vient de parler du Sénégal, précisément de l'Afrique de l'Est. Mais moi, je suis de l'Afrique centrale, et plus particulièrement de la RDC. Par rapport au secteur privé, de tout ce qu'il a dit que les entreprises, par rapport au secteur privé, on dit qu'ils veulent vers les étudiants de passer les stages, soit de les former par rapport aux expériences. Mais chez nous, c'est le contraire. Pourquoi? Parce que nous avons plusieurs institutions de commerce, aussi des secteurs privés, mais qui ne s'intéressent pas aux étudiants, ni les gouvernements aussi ne s'intéressent. Mais moi, je voulais juste, pour être court, passer les recommandations par rapport au gouvernement, du point que nous avons des lois, nous avons des codes et des articles même qui parlent de l'emploi du secteur privé. Aussi avec les réformes de droit des affaires, maintenant avec l'OADA, mais les gouvernements ont des articles, précisent aussi des articles, mais ne les mettent pas en œuvre. Moi, je veux que ces articles-là, qu'ils mettent de l'emploi aussi de jeunes, qu'ils soient en œuvre, que nos recommandations leur disent, que nous les disons que nous avons besoin de mettre en œuvre tout ce que vous proposez, tout ce que vous disiez, même au secteur privé, même à vous-même aussi, l'État étant un partenaire plus efficace dans l'entrepreneuriat. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I want us to as we're thinking deeper, which is good, as we are all here as young people from this country, we are aware that there is a gap, right, in public-private partnership. So let us not focus much as we are contributing onto the gap, because we are aware it's there. That's why we want to put across these recommendations tomorrow, and that's why we want our governments to implement, right? Yes, so let us focus our contribution on what then do we want, not on the problem per se. Because that's why we're here. We are aware of the problem. There's a missing link. We only have 15 minutes. Let us now move forward to, yes, this is what we want.
Madam Chair, that's actually excellent what you just said. We can't mandate government to cut a pie that's not growing, right? So the pie has to grow. When you talk unemployment, right, and we force companies that are already employing to then take on and force them. Trust me, that pie will become so much smaller that there won't even be an option for employment. So the question is, how do we actually even grow the pie so that there is enough incentive for them to take young people because they have the skill set, right? What the brother said from Senegal, that's the best, because they're incentivizing partnerships, creating partnerships, not mandating it, but creating it, right? And that's key and fundamental. Thank you.
Finally, I hope this will be my final. We have to be aware that there are other priorities within government. There are other priorities within private sector. We cannot close our eyes to that, right? Are we the only population in this planet? No, we are the largest, but we are not. So how can we then, how can we go around this issue? Ensuring that we will still be heard, right? So let us focus on the recommendations and not of how bad the situation has been, because we know how bad it has been. Thank you. I hope this is the recommendation.
Thank you. My name is Fitsum. I'm a researcher here in Ethiopia. Perhaps one of the solution or the way out could be there is a gap between the private sector and what's produced by universities or the academia. And one solution might be involving the private sector in designing the curriculum so that they know they will know what they want and they will contribute in that design. I can share an experience from Ethiopia. There was some banks involved in designing the banking training program in one of the colleges, and every time there is a revision in the curriculum, that bank was involved. So this will make it easier for what's demanded, to identify what's demanded in the market and to produce exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That is a very good contribution of the involvement of private sector. We are doing very well. Yes, sir. Remember to use the mic.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Babatunde Baiku from Nigeria, a student at the African Leadership Academy in Johannesburg. I'd like to mix the two ideas I've been hearing so far, which is mandating private companies to absorb interns and involving them in curriculum creation. Basically, I want to talk from a perspective of a younger youth, per se, because I feel we're concentrating more on people who are legal. If we concentrate on people who are within the ages of 16 to 18 or 15 to 18, there is a group of entrepreneurs who need help, who need to be followed up, and who need to be nurtured. And I think that compelling the private sector to work closely with schools to absorb these younger people, teach them, train them, and give them what they need to know, will go further to solve the problem before they even get to university. Because solving the problem at the university stage is taking it on when the plants have started growing. Taking it on the secondary school might be an easier way and a faster way to solve the problem of unemployment, because children are young people are used to the working environment and used to developing themselves before they even have to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, young entrepreneur. And this issue was brought about by the other lady before in the morning, whereby she talked about ensuring that entrepreneurship is not that mindset, right? It's not an alternative. You remember? So by it not being an alternative, it should be streamlined from that level, which is a good thing. Yes, Patience.
One last
microphone, please.
We've been talking about what the government can do for us. Now I'm thinking about what we as young people can do to fight unemployment. We can pledge to volunteer. When you do not have a job after school, you can volunteer your services, teach in schools. That's an entry level and a very important level. And if your skills are actually needed, and if you show yourself and prove yourself, most likely in whatever organization you're volunteering in, if they keep you, then it will be a way to engage youth and stop unemployment. And mostly, we are talking about policies and everything. If in case you volunteer, for example, for a government institution, maybe in the Ministry of Gender, and they happen to keep you, you can influence policy even at the bottom position somehow. So we as a youth can pledge our volunteerism. start at zero, be paid zero, but somewhere, if you're relevant, they will keep you, and then we can influence. Thank you.
That's a very good point, but can I break your heart on that particular point? I have to say it. I think this is the right platform. I am a young person, and I happened to sit in a panel last December, and we were picking a consultant. And you know, someone said in the panel that we will not consider the volunteering thing. If you volunteered for 5 years, it is not considered as it is. So we need to also see how can we then influence that period to still be considered as a time that you can say, I have accumulated my experience to contribute or to be employable. And I was in shock. And that is a very important agency in this part of the work. Yes, the lady at the microphone, please.
Hi, my name is Lima and I'm from Tunisia. I'm not going to answer your question because let's suppose this problem is solved. But I want to say to Precious, some people don't have the means to volunteer because it needs transport costs and something. And I suggest that governments help those people by, I don't know, giving them some allocation for transport or anything in case some companies take into consideration like volunteering and benevolent work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady at the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Saran Kaba-Jones. I'm from Liberia. There's been a heavy focus on education and education being the solution to unemployment. Clearly, in most parts of Africa, our schools and education systems are simply not up to par. There are massive failures in this sector across the continent. In Liberia, for example, 25,000 high school students last year failed the university entrance exam, 100% failure rate. What role can vocational training play in increasing employment across the continent as opposed to focusing so much on education when the education system itself is inadequate? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Momani. I want to address something that, my name is Tony. I'll just repeat it again from Africa 2.0. The young kids from African Leadership Academy, they are present. Let me just say something. It's very
Sorry, sir, you don't call them young kids. They are young people.
Okay, the young people, sorry.
We have to build their self-esteem starting now.
I know that their self-esteem is very high because of one reason. The reason why I want to communicate to them this is that in 2007, in New York City, we wrote a curriculum called Leadership, Entrepreneurship, and African Studies. So I'm deeply proud to see them today because it's something that can be rolled across Africa, and they're between the, Fred Swanica, who is the founder, asked me, can you write a curriculum as if you're writing for your nephew? And so I'm proud to see you guys today. And the second thing, I'm seeing Baba here. He's one of our leaders in Africa 2.0. He talks about agribusiness. And it's very important. There's a lady here who actually works with her kids. She's called Naomi. She makes amaranth cookies and actually sells them in Kenya. So agribusiness can be made succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to remind us that our task here is to come up with recommendation, right? And we are looking at private sector, right? Good. Entry-level jobs, entry-level job positions. That was one of the areas that we're looking at. We're looking at development and training. We're looking at collaboration with academic institutions. That is what we're looking at. And so far, just to tell you how much you have done, you have talked about involving the private sector in curriculum development, right? And also the other one that you've mentioned very critically is the issue of, yes, there is education, but how about including vocational training, where education is a challenge? How can we explore that? There is the issue of volunteering as an entry level, and then how can the government then support young people who are not able to be available to volunteer by enabling them to get to where they're supposed to volunteer, making their life a little bit bearable. That is where we are.
Solutions.
Yes. Are we together? So we need to hear more of what is our We have heard of our role, but more of what do we then want? What do we want? And I would like to start with somebody whose voice I have not heard. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Renson. I'm from Kenya. I want to talk about the issue of internship. Give you an example. My sister here has talked about like she found a lot of trouble getting internship. My suggestion is, what if the school she went into partnered with these private or job opportunities for her? It would have been easy for her to get an internship than her alone to go and find internship for herself. So what I'm recommending is the school to partner with the private institution rather than the institution to come to school, because for the school it's easy to happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I will need a volunteer to get the team that went out back here, because we still need to be in consensus of what's the right. So can somebody just, thank you very much, sir. Yeah. All right, moving. Proposal.
Chair, I propose that now maybe we focus our attention more on the recommendations, because I think at some point we did have two recommendations, but it seems as if now the whole dialogue is deteriorating. So I just wish, Chair, if you can just steer this ship into the correct direction.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Recommendation. No country stories. We know how bad it has been. Yes. Thank you very much. And all right, I'll have to welcome Chief now to share with us since he's here. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Really, I shouldn't have taken the floor because I want to be like sponge, absorb as much as possible that comes from you, and when we go to the plenary, I can bring out a bit. But I have been with the first group, and I thought I want to have a feel of your discussions at the two groups. Now, two things have been mentioned that I want to make contribution. And one, my sister from Liberia talked about the failure in schools. I had to confront that problem at one time in Nigeria. And the way we solve the problem is that we set up remedial 1 year pre-university, and it helped. Because if you have 100% failure, then that means that that year you won't have any admission to university at all. And that is not acceptable. Now, I just thought I should mention that. The other point that I would want to mention as possible recommendation is how do we encourage, advise, appeal to the private sector to have an admixture of capital-intensive and labor-saving devices and labor-intensive. Because in these days of robots and mechanization and all that, you can reduce labor drastically, and in which case you don't create as much job as you will have done. But you can also do a mixture where, well, let me give you an example of what I know very well. I'm a poultry farmer. I can set up a farm that will produce 1 million eggs a day, and the people that will be employed will not be more than 30. It will be all automated, totally. And yet, I can set up a farm that will produce have 1 million eggs a day, and I will employ over 250 people. Now, that is the sort of thing that we may have to also recommend to the private sector, that as a means of deliberately going for job creation, they should have a mixture of automation, labor-saving devices, and labor-intensive method in their thing. I thought I want to leave these two with you. I mentioned in my statement this morning that one other thing that we can ask them to do, the private sector, is that whatever money they are spending, they also show the amount of job that will be created. That is, your expenditure goes with labor job creation content, that you can look at that and say, okay, and then you can, at the end of you can monitor, you can measure, and at the end of the project or the program, you can see. And this applies not only to private sector, even to government, to civil society, everybody. Whatever you are spending, let us see the labor or job creation content, and at the end you can show the actuality and the projection, how much you have met it. And it's measurable, it's monitorable, it's possible, and maybe also at the end of each year, as a follow-up to what we are doing here today and tomorrow, maybe at the end of each year, we want to know which companies in Africa have met job creation, and of course there can be criteria set out. And we can give a token commendation, a token reward. You can do it at different levels of companies, and also encourage even new SMEs and new entrance into the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, the fire and heat is on me right now, eh?
Exactly.
Which is not fair. I'm not the only one who is discussing. Is it not?
No.
We have been able to categorically come up with two things clearly. However, we need to tailor them as recommendations. What are we urging our heads of state to do? Yes, sir.
Right. If you ask any entrepreneur, CEO in Africa why they don't take internships, what we've been talking about, it's because we have the worst labor laws on planet Earth. That's a reality. There is no incentive for me to take you as an internship, because guess what? The moment I take you, I have to take Social Security, health, all these other costs. Even for one day, and I have to pay for the whole year. So we have to urge our governments to relax labor laws so that you as an individual are transferable. You're not a burden to the company. You're not cost. You're an asset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Recommendations. Recommendations. That is, yes, I am asking the next presenter who I'm going to pick to ensure it's a recommendation, no stories. Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, you have on now? Yes, sir.
Ok, juste dire que c'est ma dernière intervention, Madame la Présidente de séance. Je sais que je suis taquin, mais c'est la dernière. Pour les recommandations, moi je dirais plutôt voir comment intéresser le secteur privé vers l'emploi des jeunes, avec une corrélation d'adéquation de la formation des besoins. Il faut identifier les besoins et il faut inviter le secteur privé, les écoles de commerce à former vers les besoins des entreprises. Parce que quand nous n'invitons pas, quand nous ne formons pas sur les besoins d'entreprise, ce sera très difficile l'accès aux jeunes à l'emploi. Donc ça, c'est une recommandation que j'aimerais partager. Et ensuite, il y a quelque chose que son Excellence le Président Obasanjo a mentionné, c'est comment aujourd'hui encourager les entreprises qui prennent beaucoup de stagiaires. Nous, au Sénégal, on a fait l'expérience du prix du meilleure entreprise en Story Success. Le story success, c'est quoi? C'est simple.
Sorry, sir. Excusez-moi. I will have to cut you short.
Okay.
Recommendation, eh?
Recommendation.
Only recommendation, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are also eating into time, and as young entrepreneurs, we need to take care of time. Or time will take care of us. So, recommendation. Yes, sir.
Okay. Been raising my hand for a while, but
recommendations.
Okay. I'm going to continue from what you said. Relaxation in the labor laws is the first priority, and then on top of that, if the government or the Ministry of Education in this regard can establish a specific department which is concerned in matters dealing with partnering with private organizations, approaching them with an incentive to send in fresh graduates as interns, which is also the internship program, which is also funded by the government. So just to cover the transportation costs, just to cover what they need to be as an interns, so that we will not burden private companies. And also, if we can have an advisory board on the designing of the curriculum towards implementation of internships for that office, and also the office will be also concerned with organizing orientation programs when students are in their final years, so that they will be able to see how to get jobs.
Thank you very much. And I'm seeing how young people we are also now getting into how things are done, business as usual, and we want to create an advisory board after advisory board. Are we going to get it done really? As at now, we only have 3 recommendations. Is it okay if I return to us? Yes. Or is there one more? Critical one? Yes. All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Galvita Vigan from Cameroon. I'd just like to say very quickly, everything we've discussed, if we're talking to African heads of states tomorrow, we have an African Youth Charter. African Youth Charter under Article 15, every single thing we're just from saying is there, under what the youth's rights are and under what the state has as responsibilities. If we want to tell them all these things, we're going to tell them, just simply tell them. Implement Article 15 of that African Youth Charter you have signed. Simple. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. So it's important that we refer them back to the African Youth Charter because it has talked about these issues. That's according to her. It is her contribution. It is her contribution. She said it all. So we have listened to her. Anyway, is that our contribution? All right.
Look, I have been at the receiving end. And please, I beg you with everything that is very dear to you, get 3 simple recommendations to our leaders tomorrow that you want them to do. 3 simple recommendations that can be followed, that can be monitored, that can be measured. And then we will also have as a follow-up what we do next year. Now, if you ask them, you refer them to Article 15. It won't go anywhere. 3 simple things, don't make it more than that. And he will remember. And next year we tell them we will ask through AU Commission what has happened in each country on these 3 simple recommendations. Don't make it more than that. If you make it more than that, they will forget.
Thank you very, very much. And that is a practical contribution on what works and what doesn't work. As at right now, what we have is one, that we are asking our government to engage private sector in curriculum development. That includes training, ensuring that whatever is being taught is relevant to what is there. The other one that came out very clearly, which we will now put it in the best Queen's language, is about volunteering. And that one was addressing entry level, because there was an issue here of lack of experience. That we don't have the experience to get into the market. And that was one that was also mentioned. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but that was one of it. And the last one that came out strongly was about relaxation of labor laws. Those are the three that came out very strongly. Are we removing one, adding one more, and we need to end this discussion?
Thank you, Karen. The first one is overlapping with the entrepreneurship. We have actually incorporated it in the, so I think in the private partnership, the training has gone into the entrepreneurial education, which is taken care in the first item. In the private partnership, I think we should be looking at them in terms of what somebody has said, in terms of the labor laws, which is very important. We should also be looking at it in terms of maybe weaving, or looking at it as employment for those people who are really getting there as interns. They should be being considered. Like some of them in the medical field, they're actually given something, when they're interns, so that it doesn't look like a wasted type of an exercise. And they should also be committed to getting them there, as a policy. Every year they're taking maybe 2%, 3%, what the president is saying. It should be very clear on how are they really participating in this job creation exercise. How are they really participating in it? So it is very important.
All right. Thank you very much. One more hand there.
Hi again. So I want to suggest that government should encourage private companies to open up in rural areas through some laws like lowering taxes or anything, so that people in rural areas have a chance to work there. Because sometimes when they choose to open in normal cities and everything because of the administrations and work and everything. And then some people in rural areas don't have the chance to work because they can't afford to live there or they can't leave their families or anything. So I think they should encourage private sector to open in rural areas.
Thank you very much. Recommendation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David. I want to say thanks to Jeff for doing this really well. Also, I've heard a lot of recommendations. I'm going to try and make this recommendation based on what has been suggested in terms of making it measurable and making it brief and very, simple. How about increased youth employment within the public sector by 20%? That's unmeasurable. It could be like in the public, what we have, like the number of people, have the number of youths that already have a job, count the new, and you can get an estimate of the new youths that have been employed in the next year or so. It's measurable, it's simple. In the public sector, statistics could be collected all across the public sector. I'm thinking that's more measurable compared to say, increase the advocacy of private sector with academia. That's not measurable.
Why just public sector?
Because it's something that the governments have more control over.
We're talking about private sector.
There's a chair, by the way. I was just reminding you guys. And we are discussing about private sector, right? That is one. And that's a point he brought about public sector, which, if I may take you back a little bit, the president that talked about the issue of expenditure versus job creation, remember? Whereby he said that we can urge our government to work together with the private sector to ensure that as much as they're spending these millions, they should also demonstrate how many young people have they employed or created jobs for. So can we think along those lines? It's something that we can think about. Yeah. Me, I want recommendations actually, so I was just reminding you of what we shared. And we're not doing so well. I don't know now what we should do moving forward. We only have actually two recommendations are the ones that are agreeable here. And there was one more by the lady from Tunisia about the government urging the private sector to expand to rural areas, which addresses the issue of inclusion, that young people are not only in urban areas. I recommendations to my ears. I don't know if they are three to you. Comrade.
Yes, lady. No, I think I'm not trying to dispute what young leader is saying. I think also when you talk about private sector, you talk about people whom are market driven, whom are profit driven. Now the question is, are people in the rural areas have that buying power, which companies are looking for? That's why you see most of the companies moving to the city areas as opposed to the rural areas. I just want us to take that into cognizance while we are still pushing our recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And the good professor said, are we not in Africa? Will we not then create ventures that will address the social needs? I'm just trying to make you think further. The ball is in your court. However, we need to agree at this particular point on our recommendations. And time is not on our side. What recommendations are?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at what has happened in Japan, when they discovered they are doing very well, they found out their neighbors are not doing very well. So they started outsourcing. They told them, make this component, the other component, and something else. We can also talk to the government to see how they can, the private sector can also cultivate, a culture of outsourcing some of the items so that the youth can also participate in the production of some of the components. They do it in the motor industry, they do it in other sectors. It's possible. You can outsource some services, yes, and that's a very good way of ensuring that people, wherever they are, whether they're in the rural area, they are also involved in that particular given activity.
Right. Our time is up, and we need to go to plenary in the next 10 minutes. It's 16:20, so we need to go to plenary at 16:30, and we need recommendations. So finally, what we have been able to discuss at this time, we can add them later, but I will need another set of people to tailor this into a very nice way that sounds like a recommendation. Are we okay? The first one is on relaxation of labor laws. The second one is on expanding to rural areas, urging private sector to expand to rural areas. And the third one is on the inclusion of involvement of private sector in curriculum development. That is what you have been able to come up with as at now. Do we have additions? Do we agree so that this can be then prepared in a very nice way into a recommendation?
Okay, can I say something? We won't, but the one on the service in rural areas, it's counterintuitive to what's going on in the private sector. In fact, quite frankly, we want people in the cities because you're able to provide more services and goods, and they tend to be wealthier and access to whatever in a very small place. The reality is that there's just no infrastructure available in the rural areas as an incentive for anyone to go out there, unless it's providing a service through mobile phones, grocery technologies, and that sort. So it's kind of counterintuitive. So I don't know. Yes, we can include it, but there's just some gaping holes that are in it. That's all.
All right.
I think
the microphone, please.
I think we could quickly solve this rural area thing, which is very, very valid. We can make it that the private sector should have a policy of 20-30% local content. That would, in terms of their input.
Absolutely.
Say that again, sorry.
The private sector could have 20-30% inputs in local content.
Yeah, that's measurable and that would work.
Okay, so could we have like 3 people formulate this? Okay, we need the writers again. Do we take the same guys?
No.
No. All right, can we quickly then, can we quickly volunteer? Just 3 guys.
Let's present our 3.
Yes, please, because we don't have time and we need to present this in plenary. Volunteers, I think, as I did last time.
I'll write that one on later.
All right, thank you. We have one.
I have one for you here.
Thank you very much. We have one more lady, the lady from Tunisia. Thank you. Tunisia was the easiest country to say. So the 3 of you, please, could you help us with that? And yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you. And the lady from Tunisia, thank you. And the gentleman here, thank you. All right, for the team that had gone to formulate the first recommendations that were in regards to entrepreneurship, and if you could have one meeting, please. I am still in power. And power is sweet. So please, if you want to buy for this chair, you can try next election. The first one, the first recommendation is governments should develop clear incubation policies with specific guidelines for youth empowerment with timelines for implementation. Number 2, governments should have clear social inclusion policies for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to access finance and government patronage and procurement.
In procurement.
I said and.
Government patronage and procurement, yes.
I'm reading English. And. The third one is governments in partnership with private sector and training institutions to ensure the introduction of practical entrepreneurship curriculum from secondary to tertiary levels. Full stop. Are we in consensus? Are they sounding like the things we send them to do? Yes or no? Yes.
Yeah, I have a small question. What would be the role of youth in all this? Mainly the incubation bodies, because that's where you can actively do something. And
let her finish.
Yeah. So it sounds that we always telling people what to do for them, and I'm sounding this again in all 6 recommendations. So can we turn one of these to engage youth in that?
Okay. So what you're saying is that as much as you're talking about government and working in partnership with the, let's say, private sector, also with youth to realize all this we're saying.
And also for AU to appoint a youth organization in each country to follow up and monitor what is going on between AU and the government, because sometimes I have difficulty to make a difference between AU and our local governments.
Now that is another recommendation, which is very tough. Okay. Are you responding? Okay.
According to the president, if he says we should not bother to post this thing that was signed by them, how we should follow or impact on these 3 recommendations of the unions? That they won't divert what they would listen to us. Because if they could not follow what they actually signed, are they going to impact this? Because it's just like a waste of time. So it needs to be measurable and monitoring.
You are very interesting and dynamic set of young people who have right now spent 2 hours agreeing and finally disagreeing. Like now this, Caroline, you should put it aside and let's not. What are we saying? What are we saying? We are saying that what this group has done is good, right? Yes. But there's a gap in the role of young people, if I heard you correctly.
Exactly.
Baka. Oh, now I'm speaking American. Sorry. So can we then just formulate with your consensus just one thing that the young people
I think we shouldn't lose sight of one thing. That you cannot have the incubation without the youth having their ideas.
Yes.
And if you don't have the ideas, the incubators will not work.
Okay.
So the commitment of the youth is in them engaging themselves to develop ideas that are game changers for society.
Excuse me. I totally, I'm sorry. Can I? I totally agree with what he's saying. But what I also noticed in policies and elaborating engaged commitment, when it's not specifically said, the role of youth, they'll put whoever they want to do those things in the name of youth, but not with youth.
Thank you very much. So allow me as chair, in the powers vested upon me, to Madam, can you write for me one paragraph of what you're saying, the role of young people, what we have said?
One sentence.
Baka. One sentence, just that. He said it, it's in the air.
Not in the air.
We need it written down.
No, not in the air. He said it in the beginning. When a youth come together as cluster 20, whatever it is.
I agree.
Please put that one. So
Yeah,
they
we
know
need it down.
they cannot refuse an incubation body when
we need that
you
one
go to
down.
them.
Are you understanding me, please?
Yeah, I think we need that one down, written down. But I think what she's saying is that where we have written there for the youth, we just read with the youth.
With the youth, not
yes,
for the youth.
not for the youth,
Okay.
with the youth, right?
Okay.
Not for the youth, with the youth.
Okay.
They do whatever we have stipulated there with the youth, so that they engage the youth either at the AU level or at the government, national government levels.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I want to thank all of you for really trying to contribute, agree and disagree. I hope this has been productive. Thank you very much for your contribution.